Every passionate follower of Jesus has a deep desire to share their faith with others. How do we make and multiply disciples around the block and around the world? How do we do it at a rate that can compete with population growth, a growing secular culture, and 40% of the world considered completely unreached? With hosts Doug Lucas of Team Expansion, Lee Wood of One Body Church, John Hirima of Big Life, Roger Shull of E3 Partners, and special guests from around the world, we'll explore how believers can come together to make more disciples. Welcome to the More Disciples podcast.
All right, yes, here with another episode of the More Disciples podcast. Really excited for this episode today. Our guest is Eric Derry, who's out of Louisville, Kentucky, and another one of my co-hosts, Doug Lucas, works right alongside Eric in Kentucky. So, Doug, why don't you introduce our guest for the day?
I would love to do that, Roger, because I have been with this guy for as long as there have been, a sky on the earth, I think. When I was in Bible college, he actually came to our college and began attending, even while he was a high school student, a group of planning meetings we had to try to map out the way we would try to make disciples around the world. And he stuck with us really ever since. He did an extended summer plus a semester internship with us while I was working in Uruguay. And he was just exemplary. In fact, little known story, we as a group of 5 missionaries had trouble breaking through to start an actual Sunday service, a weekend worship service. And on Eric's language route, he ran into a cafe owner and over time developed such a relationship that he could ask that cafe owner, could we meet in his cafe? And so in a sense, you could say that it was Eric who actually encountered the place where we started that first weekend worship there in Montevideo. And it's just gone straight full tilt. He was working in a youth ministry for a couple of years after his marriage, letting that settle in, and then came back right with us full time. He served a number of different roles with us in our org, but most recently, he's actually the VP of Outreach. And in our org, what that means is he coaches around 18 guys who in turn coach scores of guys in over 50 countries all around the world. So I'm not exaggerating to say that Eric really does oversee all of our overseas works. He speaks into the lives of these field coordinators and coaches them to maximum effectiveness and has been instrumental in bringing disciple-making movement strategies to our org. And to me, he was the guy who gently would say, Doug, why don't you come and lead this prayer at this training? Because I think you'll like this stuff. And I would come and shake my head and think, this is so ethereal. What is this? And little by little, through his gentle spirit, he kind of won me to this approach. And now we're transitioning, as you know, so that roughly 80 to 90% of our workers all around the world are utilizing DMM strategies. So, Eric, the question we like to ask you to start, why don't we have everybody else say hi too? Lee, you want to say hello?
Hey, everybody.
John, you want to say hello?
Hey, it's great to be here. Looking forward to hearing more from Eric.
Yeah, thanks, John. So, Eric, why don't we go to you? And I don't know, let's start with maybe a very simple question. What attracted you to the simple, reproducible approaches that we sometimes lump under the heading of DMM strategies? What attracted you to that?
Well, first of all, Doug, thanks for letting me come and be with you guys. This is inspirational to me. It's always good to rub shoulders and spend time with you guys. So happy birthday, brother, by the way, the day that we're actually recording this. So discipleship. I mean, I don't know. It just seems like ever since I studied Luke and Acts as a senior in high school and just like read that, we had to memorize those books and those chapters. It just like, that's the way Jesus did it. And it's like always stuck with me that's his model. That was his command, is that we would go and make disciples. So anytime throughout all my years of just being a part of this mission and being a part of the church, that's what keeps ringing out. So every time I hear it, it's like my ears perk up. I want to figure out, how do we do this better? And so it was in that light that I met a guy named Frank Shatner down in Orlando at a church planning conference called Exponential. And he started telling me about all these other guys that were doing this. And he invited me to go get some training to go do it. So that was kind of the beginning of that.
When was that, Eric? So let's so we're in 2021. When was that exponential conference that you attended and connected with Frank Shatner?
Yes, it have been April of 2009.
And that's really where you got started learning not just about discipleship, but disciple making movements, you'd say?
Yeah, I mean, I like everybody else. I'd read the David Garrison book back in the 90s, and then got involved. Actually, the Ralph Neighbor stuff that was like more like cell group, and so that was kind of precursor to that. But David Garrison, then 2009 is when I got the first training over in the Philippines with OMF, and they were doing what they were calling the Jonathan training, and it was kind of a 2-week version of what Curtis had a 4-week version that he had done all over the world, and that was their knockoff of that that training. So 2009.
As VP of Outreach, you're involved in a lot of fields. Would you just take one, and probably the one I should pick is the one in northern Ghana, just for a second, keeping in mind most of our audience is a North American audience, but use that as a case study and just briefly in a couple of minutes sum up what they do. And while you're doing that, I'll grab a stat for the kind of growth they've had using these simple principles. Can you kind of describe the way Terry and Amy carry out that work with Isaac and Moses?
Do you want like a little historical vignette of how it got started? Yeah. So in
However
2000, in 2010 is when we first did our training. I can still see him sitting in the front row there. And Frank was there, and he brought in a lot of different leaders like Bruce Carlton and others, Jeff Alvarez, other trainers from different streams and stuff. We were all there, and there was Terry and Amy. Amy was actually present at that first training via a computer screen because she was up taking treatments for cancer at the time. And I remember her, she had the handkerchief on, all that. And then I think on the last day, maybe she was able to make it the very last day. I can't remember exactly, but they did their whole, you had to come up with a full, here's what we're going to do, our master plan. And so that was part of the training, and they presented that. They went and started training a lot of people for, several years, and including Isaac and Moses and all that. And they really started seeing their first fruit was in 2014. And I remember all of us coming together for another training, basically the Medicamp Module 1 training and we all came together, and it was there that they were bringing in the fruit of about 100 baptisms that had started in the middle of July of 2014. So from that point on, they tweaked what they were doing. They went back. They said, "Here, let's upgrade based on what we've learned, and let's keep going." And then I remember it went from they had 50 people that multiplied to 150 people in July, but then from there, it was like, okay, we have 500 the next year. And it was like, okay, 500 in a year. That's awesome. But then I remember the day when all of a sudden it was like 500 a month were being baptized. And it was like, what is going on? It's like the Lord truly did take a group of people and just started seeing the multiplication. And then it was multiple streams. They needed some more training. So Big Life, they helped send somebody over to do that second level of training, and then they got involved in a way that was great. It's like we've been now collaborating with John's guys and Lee's guys, and we're all just kind of working together over in Africa. And so our guys are providing some of the main training, and we're just all kingdom guys, right? So it's just like, hey, let's get this job done. And what we've seen is multiple bush fires happening all throughout that area.
I asked them for how things are going at the end of 2020, and they had met with 13 of their group, regional leaders. They had seen 1,194 new groups start in the middle of the pandemic in 2020, which brought that total of groups since you said 2014 to 3,558. During 2020, they had seen 5,135 baptisms, which brought it to 16,770 baptisms since 2014. They have an overall weekend worship attendance now of 22,530, all starting from those 9 years when they'd had 30 people come in 9 years, it went to this after that training. So what do you think was the secret, Eric, that really changed them? And then we'll pass it on to Lee or John or Roger to let them ask a couple of questions. But what do you think is the main difference that changed after that first initial training?
Well, when they started doing the orality storying, that really was a key for them. The rural train, I can't even say the word, but they started, then having everybody that would come to the group would learn the story, and the homework was, okay, you got to go and share this story with someone else this week. So just abundant seed sowing and using orality and all that. It's just a total. You could look at all the abundant, the elements, the universal elements, and they're all there. It's like, praying like crazy, getting everybody to do that. But it's just being simple and passing it on. And then there's just an expectation. Of course, they were pouring into 2 people, and those That's 2 people then passed it on. So,
but it was a Muslim area too. Don't forget, it was a Muslim area, so very difficult.
60%.
So a couple of stories there. So those 7 principles that we have gone over, so those relational before organizational, and that dynamic I talked to you about, Eric, as image bearers from your home. I know Amy and Terry Ruff, and I know Isaac, and we're connected, we're communicating, we're collaborating in abandonment to Jesus with one another, the same way it is in Louisville, as in Tampa, as in Georgia, as North Carolina. It's that same basic allegiance, abandonment to hearing, obeying, and spreading. And it's really fascinating knowing Isaac and like the way that our hearts, mine and Stacy's, are knit together with theirs, just as co-laborers. And what's amazing, I get excited, is they're actually reaching the Fulani. Now, the Fulani are basically the enemies of the gospel, okay? And they were actually caring for them from their farm there, and they began to reach the Fulani. And the Fulani now are missionaries, representatives of the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ. So It's super exciting to talk about that. And for us on this podcast to basically we're getting to touch the world from our backyards with one another. And hopefully what I get excited about is like when you actually look at that on a map now, Eric, you can actually see all the places that it is and where it's not, because we're working, we are connecting, communicating, and collaborating with one another to multiply disciples and churches until the whole world knows. So, man, I'm so glad to have you on the podcast, bro, and also so grateful for your leadership as part of the North American facilitation team for 2414, dude.
Yeah, apparently I'm the only one who hasn't collaborated with you on the call.
We're going to get into that in just a minute, Roger. So,
well, that's because you were only 10 in 2009. I'm joking.
Oh man, a little bit older than that, but I wasn't saved yet. That's the most important part.
But I think that is one of the most exciting things, Eric, is just the way that how you just describe ministries coming together and working together and not caring whose name or brand is on it. But I think for our listeners, the other thing that's added to that when we work together side by side is the added accountability. When you got 3 or 4 or 5 different organizations involved now, we can actually have more accountability to see the work actually, completed. And so exciting. So appreciate everything you do.
Now, Eric, that's one. Oh, go ahead, Roger.
Well, yeah, actually, with all this talk about your work internationally, I think it's super duper exciting, and even how you've been collaborating. I have probably the least amount of experience on the call as well, working internationally. So I'm always curious about how this has played out in North America, where your maybe home base is, and just hearing from Doug mentioning, or even talking once before, how you've been faithfully prayer walking your community, or even working in prisons. I'd love to hear also about what the Lord's done in those contexts as well.
Well, the one, just mentioning prayer walking, to me, it just keeps me grounded into it's like I mean, you could, especially during a year of pandemic, right? It's easy you could just stay in your house and do everything online, but it's like, you got to get out and spend some time among the people. And that weekly prayer walk-in with my chat partner just seems to be, it's just like a life stream. It's like an abundance of giving me the opportunity to, one, share what you're learning in your soaps and your Bible time and your word time, and from the 3/3 time, that you're doing. And then it's like, well, it gives you that opportunity to put it out there. It's like, okay, this is where the boldness has got to come out. Your courage has got to come out. And, we're knocking on doors of strangers, or, you're trying to start a conversation with somebody in a cafe shop, while you're eating cookie and drinking a coffee or something, or, or go into a business and just ask somebody that you've never even met before if there's anything we could pray for them about. So, and then just following the Lord's Spirit and the leading of that, to get into some spiritual conversations and see where it goes, and see where, see if you can get a group started out of the people that you're praying for, and then to come back and to follow up with the prayer requests you've made and say, hey, about 2 months ago, we stopped here at this house and we prayed for your cancer. How's that going? And then to hear, yeah, it's gone. The Lord answered your prayers. It's gone. I'm cancer free today. It's like, that's so cool, just to see how the Lord is responsive to those simple but obedient steps of praying. So that to me is one of the highlights every week for me, is just getting out. And in fact, I'll be going out today. So
Eric, can you just maybe, I have so many people when they hear podcasts or go through the training go, I could never do that. Yeah. I could never go out, go prayer walk and talk to strangers. So I think they have this perception that they're going to get attacked, but maybe just share a couple of examples that, it's a blessing to go out and get into the harvest like that.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, for, 2 hours, we're out there walking, and most of the time you're just with your prayer partner and you're praying. That's the majority of the time. Maybe you're going to have 4 conversations, maybe 3, maybe 1. It just really depends. You don't know what's going to happen. You're just saying, Lord, here we are. We're just volunteers. We're willing to be used by you today. And so teach us to pray, lead us to the right spots, or lead other people. If you have somebody you want to connect to your kingdom, if you just want us to bless someone, or if you want to bless us, here we are. We just show up. I mean, it's just showing up, right? It's just being there. Amen. Whether it's rainy, whether it's sunshine and hot, it doesn't matter. You just show up. You just get into that. You just put it in your calendar, just like anything else that you would do on a weekly basis, right? So we show up, and it's not, we don't know. And yeah, it's hard. And it's hard for anybody to talk to a stranger, right? So, I'm thinking of this one spot. It's called the tea room or whatever, the teacup. And we'll go in there sometimes to start off and just get a drink, and we're just kind of praying for each other. And sometimes there'll be somebody sitting across the way and sitting on the table. I'm sitting there, Lord, how in the world do I break this ice? They're having and it might be as simple as like when the waiter brings a sandwich to the other people, you go, hey, man, that looks pretty nice. What's that? What is that, off of the menu? And they'll say, well, it's, this is a peanut butter and jelly or whatever. It's a ham and cheese. And you go, okay, have you ever had that before? Is it good? No, this is the first time. And that's the break. It's just an icebreaker. It's just common sense conversation. And then before long, you're ending up praying for this person's mother-in-law. You're praying for the daughter that's on a trip. You're praying for them and their future and what they're going to be doing. It's like you just never know where that conversation is going to go. But, it might be I was prayer walking with somebody on a bridge that goes across the Ohio River from Kentucky to over into Indiana. And he had like a hat on, and he had some kind of a shirt on, and it was related to like Seattle Seahawks, and then it was about I said, oh, Seattle. And so you just start with whatever they're eating, whatever they're wearing. You just start into the conversation with something simple like that. And we ended up literally at the end of the time, we were teaching him how to share the gospel. We had went through, and it's a long story to tell you everything, but we went from Seattle Seahawks to sharing the gospel, and he had a list of 5 people that he was supposed to go share it with. So you just never know where the conversation is.
You know how simple that is if our audience can catch it, is like you're being obedient to go and praying while walking.
Yeah.
Like that's
Exactly.
Luke 10, Matthew 10.
Yeah.
It's so simple. Go praying while walking for laborers. And if they will listen to you, hang out with them and teach them to do the same thing.
Yeah.
It's really not rocket science. We're afraid to do it, but you build spiritual muscle by being disciplined, being a disciple around that. And you do it where you're at. So that's really encouraging. Curtis trained me, and I know that he's talked to you. All missions is whether it's in the prisons, whether it's on your block, whether it's in Ghana, all missions is doing the same thing there as there, wherever there is. And your faithfulness to do that from your home is so encouraging to me, Eric. Thanks so much, man.
Yeah, and I like that idea of building spiritual muscle as well. Because I think for myself, when I started prayer walking, I think when I first came to Christ, I was so enthusiastic, I didn't really care. I just wanted to tell people about Jesus. But when that feeling wore off, I know, like for me, when I was like, I got a weekly time to prayer walk, I had to kind of motivate myself beforehand. Like, it took maybe honestly like 2 or 3 years until I was like, oh, this is normal, and even looking forward to it and excited about it. So I think it's really awesome to see your consistency with I think you said your chat buddy, if I understand correctly, it's like an accountability partner you were talking about. So it's awesome to see just that practical thing of just put it on the calendar, start building that spiritual muscle and go, because it's the Holy Spirit that does it. And as long as you're praying and out there, God will show up.
But John, I hear your question, and I get this sometimes when I'm sharing these principles. Somebody will say, but I'm introvert. What do I do? So I really get your question, John. I think it's a fair question. And as much as I would like to say, hey, anybody can do this, let's face it, Eric is the kind of guy that never met a stranger. He can strike up a conversation with anybody. So what I've told people before, if they do feel at first especially very introverted and shy, or less likely, maybe they'd feel awkward or feel that hot feeling in their skin to go up to somebody and ask him what his sandwich is, then the great thing is we love to pair up one of those folks who feels a little bit less likely to break into a new conversation with a person who is more likely to break into conversation. Because what we often see is that once the conversation is going, the person who claimed to be an introvert is a great relating conversationalist. They just aren't likely to strike up a conversation with somebody they don't know if they think it'll feel awkward. So pairing them up. And I think about your buddy, you called him your chat partner, like Roger clarified for us, somebody that you're doing accountability questions with on a weekly basis or every other week basis. Your chat partner, we won't mention him by name, but he impresses me as not the kind of guy that would be exuberant out there, laying his life out on, new like external relationships. But with you, I bet he's a great supporting cast, isn't he? He does great, I bet.
He's and he's the local guy. He lives close to the area where we prayer walk. So actually, he's super. And you're right. When you first meet, I'm probably the one most likely to talk first, but he's got a lot of content and he's super.
Super
So
idea.
I wanted to share something from the people on the other side of that I'm more like Eric, and go back to a first mistake, that you can go like really wide and get spread too thin with this. Like right now I'm not prayer walking on a weekly basis right now myself. Okay. Because I'm actually engaged in 4 actual discipling relationships locally, okay, which is really more than I should be. But the beauty of this is once you have disciples and groups/churches, everybody's obeying until they enter into a discipling relationship. I only mention this because Doug and Eric and John, I think Roger knows about it too, is I went really wide at first, okay? Yes. 63 groups, and then I couldn't spend the amount of time inside of those relationships to actually make disciples at first. Mm-hmm. So it was a major mistake of mine at first. So until you find 1 or 2, for me, once I've done that and I find them, I've got to stick with them and spend more time inside of the assist with those people so that they get it and they're obeying as well.
But guys, don't we dream about having a guy who makes the mistake of starting 63 groups?
Yeah, exactly. I just want to make sure we're not going to go through all of Lee's mistakes.
Exactly.
The other thing I think is important for people to understand is that you also have found creative ways to find people kind of in a waiting mode. I remember once a person you encountered who was actually homeless, sleeping in his pickup truck. Of course, your visits to a jail have given you a lot of options, because you talk about a captive audience. I hate to make that joke, but they are going to be there. They're going to be there. So maybe talk about your trips each week when it's not COVID, of course, but talk about your trips each week to the jail, if you would, and how that's played out.
Amen.
And maybe talk about the way they've reached others inside.
In both of these, prayer walking and even doing the ministry and outreach in the penitentiary, I just want to underscore that we are all becoming disciples as well. And doing this actually help. I mean, it's not that I'm doing it for a selfish reason, but on the back end of this, I'm being blessed. Just like I feel like I'm the one that walks out of these things most blessed by doing it. The fact that I went prayer walking, at the end of the day, I grew the most. By going and sharing and being there at that penitentiary. I don't know, but when I'm walking out of there, sometimes it's tears just rolling down my eyes from the faith I'm seeing from, the people as they respond to God's word, whether it's their first time or whether it's, their 100th, it doesn't matter. It's like, wow, God is alive and well, and he is, showing up and blessing, even my partner, whoever I'm there doing this with. So, we are becoming disciples, and that discipline of prayer walk and that discipline of sharing is part of us becoming a better disciple. God is growing me and making me better because I'm doing that. So
that's good.
So I don't know. I got an invite to come and share and it was to do the ZoomA tool. And yet you can't do the ZoomA tool, the online portion of it, but of course, all the principles you can definitely do. So to do this in the prison. And so I went through all the rigmarole, all the processes of getting your badge and getting getting everything that you have to do to be able to get in, it's a long process, but it was worth it. And so we got in, we offered what we were wanting to do. And we basically started, with just some simple tools and started planning. And it was basically, I made it a weekly habit of going out to the penitentiary. And over time we saw an initial group of about 11 whittled down to about a group of 3 or 4 that were solid into the accountability of having like a 3/3 group, learning the tools. We were training the little tools as we went, but we always had a 3/3. And I remember when we got kind of towards the end of like all the tools have been trained, we actually threw out the 411 tool, which, is one of those tools that some people use. And it really helped them because they had already learned everything else. And we were able to lay down that 411 tool and then ask them point blank, okay, so you've been doing this 3/3. It's been a blessing, right? So when are you going to share this with other people? And I can remember the day, and I was like, yeah, this has been a great blessing. We look forward to it. In fact, we really have been thinking we should, can we start this with other people? It's almost like they needed permission. It's like, no, absolutely. You go for it. And over the course of about a month and a half, we saw that tree just kind of, that little Gen Map tree just kind of blossom. And they had started about 12 groups. And some of them were actually on the outside of the prison through a phone call to their family. And some of these guys are in there for a long time. They're going to be in there. They're going to be in there for years still. And some of them were going to be getting out, but it was like they started it in their own little dorms, their own places where they were sleeping or whatever with inmates. And then some of them had already multiplied. And so we saw like 3rd generation, these guys are receptive. Yeah, they have a lot of time, but, they really, and it's hard. It's hard to be also sharing their faith it's a tough environment to do so. But they really have pulled together. And so you can see some growth like that. So I'll stop it there.
That's awesome. That's awesome to hear what God's doing in the prisons and all the training you've been able to do. I just wanted to take one minute to define a few of the things that you said, because I know we have some listeners who are not familiar with movements and maybe not familiar with terminology. And in all the podcasts, we've been throwing them out and not defining them. But just a few things. 3/3 group, Eric mentioned, is just an effective way to just really just a guide for a time of discipleship or a simple church or a training group or things like that help foster both depth of discipleship and multiplication. 411 training is just a training to get people motivated to identify who in their life they can share with and what to share in the gospel. And just a gen map tree, just that he mentioned, that's just kind of a way to map out as groups multiply, to map out the health of all those groups so that there can be just more training, more discipleship towards health in those groups. But one that you did mention briefly is ZoomA, which I think we might have mentioned on this podcast, but I've never really talked in depth. But you have been working with ZoomA. I'd love for you to talk more about that tool and just how you've used it. It's an online kind of systematic way to train on movement principles, disciple making and church planting movements. But you said in the prisons, you obviously couldn't do it online, so you had to use the material just right there. It's one of many ways to train, but it's one that has been seeing some fruits. So yeah, Eric, why don't you talk about ZoomA some and just what it is and how it's been used and maybe what's been the fruit of that so far?
Yeah, I would like to share a little just on how it came to be. We were all in prayer in a kind of a regional gathering of a bunch of these movement leaders, and they were just saying, what can we do? What can we do? How can we help? Lord, what is it? And it was actually an answer to prayer that the Lord gave that day in that meeting. And, I can remember it to this day, but it's just like, it took about 10, 15 minutes of answer, but a lot of us were just like quiet. And, one person in the room was just like really, going for it. And at the end of that meeting, ZoomA was like the name on the board. And there was a commitment made that, okay, we're going to put this thing together over the coming couple years. And that was clear back in 2015. And so on Valentine's Day of 2017, the website went live for everyone that you love, right? On Valentine's Day, for everyone that you love. But it was basically all of these principles and tools and put together in such a way that someone could basically take a course and get all of this thing, learn it online, and with the idea and the hope that someday it would have many, many languages. As of today, there are 34 languages available. All of this stuff's available in 34 languages as of today. And so you can go to the website. It's zume.training. ZoomA is a Greek word out of Matthew 13:33, where Jesus says, what is the kingdom like? It's like ZoomA, Z-U-M-E, but it's like you say it, ZoomA, and it's yeast, it's the leaven, it's just a common ingredient that a common person, a woman, uses to put into a meal, and then it impacts the entire meal. And so ZoomA, referring to all these multiplying, multiplicative disciple training tools and principles, when you put it together, it's just the common stuff that Jesus showed us how to do. He lived this himself, and he taught us how to do this. And then it impacts everything. It impacts culture. It impacts families. It impacts governments. It impacts, education. It impacts our entire lives. It impacts the entire world. And so it'll just go wild. So ZoomA is just a tool anybody can use. It doesn't matter what stream you're from, what church you're from, but you can use it. It's
quick story with that, Eric. So next month, Lord willing, I'll be traveling to Eurasia, and the people in those countries in Eurasia I'm following up, and they've been using that in their language there, ZoomA. So that's how I've been connected and following up. And interestingly, I actually met John and Forrest because Curtis was initially we were meeting in 2015 around the development of ZoomA, and I got to beta test that before it was ever electronically with people in California that with the Valverdes, and to see how the Lord takes simple things from hearing, obeying, and to see that spread. Because it's really, that's what a disciple is that's hearing, right, obeying, and spreading. And it's the redemption of the communication means that we have unto the nations. And so it's really amazing the way that the Lord gives the increase from there, just hearing, obeying, and spreading all of his commandments, because that's what Jesus did. Thank you so much for the role that you have in that, man, because it's amazing.
That's right. The language role, helping with translations, but also little known, the assigning of coaches to follow up when somebody asks a question. And there are a lot. There's that little chat bot in the lower right, and somebody will say, boy, I don't really understand this, or I need a coach because I'm not getting this. And Eric is the lead guy that assigns coaches to be able to follow up with those people. And you have what now? Probably 50 or 100 coaches around the world that'll help with people, right? And as those requests come in, Eric right now is the lead guy. I don't see how he does it, but 3 times a day he works with this queue to be able to get. I think we can probably attach with this podcast a bunch of show notes, you could call them. So we'll be able to give handouts with a 3/3 group pattern, and we'll be able to give maybe a few definitions written out, but we can also give the link, of course, for ZoomA, and just say something if you wouldn't mind. And I just messaged Brandon to make sure this was okay. He's our tech guy that's working behind the scenes, and he said it was fine. Would you just say a word about the number of how would you call it? Like courses that are being right now staged, or the number of people are involved? Give just a real, 2-minute summary of the biggest heat map stats. And while you're talking about them, we'll ask Brandon to overlay those on the video portion, and we'll include them in the show notes on the audio portion.
Don't forget the ASL stuff that's emerging too. No pressure, Eric, but that fourth of the UPGs would be deaf, and that we're working on ASL inside of ZoomA as well.
Well, again, I want to say that this thing is not any one person, and this is like a collaboration of God's people putting all this together, and people from many different streams are working together, and people in this, we all represent different organizations right here on this podcast, and have been involved with it from the beginning. And this isn't anything. This is not my thing. This is like God's thing. God really gave a gift to the world by making this available. So one website you could go to, anybody can go to this one, zume.vision/maps. And then they could go there and they could see, what's going on in the last 100 hours. And literally, as I'm looking at it right now, I'm looking at 1 minute ago, something happened in Trinidad and Tobago. And they're looking at the simple definition of disciples and churches. 3 minutes ago, someone from Singapore jumped in. They're looking at leadership cells, and that's in the Mandarin language. And then also in Singapore, 4 minutes ago, someone was looking at training cycle for maturing, believers. 5 minutes ago, someone from Nigeria. 7 minutes ago, someone from Ghana. 10 minutes ago, also from Nigeria. 11 minutes ago, from Hungary, somebody's looking at baptism and how to do it. So then you'll see a map, and you'll see all of the activity all over the world just in the last 100 hours. So over the last 3 or 4 days, you can see what God, what people are doing in the world and how they're interacting. It gives me goosebumps to look at this. It's like, gee, and then the other place where the coaches can come in and see, and I don't know if this is available to the public at general, but they can come in and see a whole snapshot of everything going on, like as far as registrations and things like that. So I'm just, as of today, this year in 2021, we have seen 101,426 visitors come to the ZoomA.training website, and that's from 214 different countries and territories. And so then, out of those 101,000, people are offered the option of registering and leaving an email and their name, whatever they want to put down there, but an active email. And we've had 17,226 people from 154 countries and territories do that. And most of those are coming in from India. Most of the people that are registering now are India. The United States used to be number 1, and it is now number 10. There are 10 other countries in front of us: Pakistan, Indonesia, Nepal, Tanzania, Iraq, Nigeria, Algeria, Afghanistan are all in front of the United States as far as people who are registering on the site. And then for coaching requests, you have people from like 33 different countries, and United States is still the number 1 for that. But these other countries are coming strong, and they're going to surpass it. So
that's great.
Those are just some stats. Those are, again, we're more excited. We're excited about those big numbers, but we're more excited about the one person that receives it and says, "Lord, I want to follow you, and I want to become this Christian. I want to become a follower of Jesus. I want to, lead my friends and my family to know him as well." And they can do this without any help. They don't need a coach. They can just follow the course in their language. They can download it on their phone using a little app called app.zume.training. And all of that information could be available on their phone, and they can use it offline. They don't have to have internet. Of course, when they download it, they'll need it. But then once it's there, they can use that. And it's all free. It's free, made available by donors. It wasn't that it didn't cost something. It's cost probably over $1 million to provide all this. But there it is. And it'll look something very much like that, what Lee's showing there on the phone. So
yeah,
It'll look exactly like that.
Lee just held up the app that was mentioned. So this is an encouragement that if you're listening to this on the podcast, that we do have a YouTube channel, The More Disciples.
Lee's our new graphic specialist on the YouTube.
I'm just saying they're tools that are out there that people are using. It's knife, fork, spoon, plates, and bowls, like Curtis says, tools that Jesus is redeeming to reach every person, every people, every place. And that's what the podcast is about, More Disciples. We're doing that stuff with one another. It makes me you said Jiminy. I don't know what that is, but I'm excited too.
One of the just a note for any prayer warriors out there, man. Go to that map, that ZoomA map that has all these things popping up for the last several hours, 100 hours. And just start praying over those things, those pop-ups. It's an incredible time of prayer and being with the Lord when you see that.
I want to say one thing because Lee asked me to, and that is one of the most recent languages that is on the radar for everybody is American Sign Language. Oh, yeah. And this is representing the first one of many. But if you look at any unreached people group list, you will always find deaf of this country, the deaf speakers of this country. And it's like, oh my. And so now we've got a whole group of people that are going through it, and they've already done their first batch. They've trained a whole group of people, and now they're putting it into American Sign Language. Great. And soon, we need to pray them across the finish line. They've been working hard on this, and they've had some glitches because the enemy doesn't want this available, but they hit those glitches and they work around it and they work hard, but they want to train 500 people just in this first year using this tool. But ZoomA will soon be available in American Sign Language, and from there, hopefully to the nations. 40%
of the deaf are a people group. If we combined all the deaf everywhere that are unreached, they'd make up 1/4. 25% of those that are lost. And as an American Sign Language, 40% of that, it's not like having to go to someplace. That language will translate. So we can mobilize that tool and reach them where they're at. So it's really something to pray about. It's an amazing opportunity that we have for such a time as this.
That's great.
So I think that's awesome. And there's a lot of great training tools or methods. Eric mentioned his first intro was a 2-week training in person. This is one that if you don't have anything, start there. Go to ZoomA. But I don't know. We only have a few minutes left, so I don't know if we can really dive into this. But I know there's also, we already mentioned some collaboration that Eric, you've done. I don't know if we could talk about that more. Like, I know you and John, just across organizations have been collaborating, but also with 2414. I think we've mentioned it on this podcast, but I haven't dived into it. Maybe you could talk about that. And I'd even love to hear John's perspective on just even how that's been beneficial for the cross-pollinating across organizations.
Yeah. So in the org, my boss is Doug, but in the 2414 collaboration, my boss is Lee. Lee is the North American facilitation team, which includes Canada and the U.S. That's one of 32 regions in the world. The 2414 collaboration. We're all about connecting and communicating and collaborating, and we really drop our labels, and we're just saying, where does the gospel still need to get? Where is the kingdom of God not? We want to have the eyes to see that, and we just keep asking the Lord, okay, who do we need to connect with now? Let's get the job done. And maps are important. These heat maps of saying, okay, well, we have some disciples working here. We have who's working in this spot, and basically we're doing that we're trying to do that for the whole world. Amen. And why should any place on the planet be without the gospel and be without a real reasonable opportunity to hear it, to be trained in it, to make other disciples in it? We can do this in our generation. Our generation can see this happen, where all of those unreached peoples are reached, and have more than that. They have a saturation happening of those who want to follow Jesus. Of course, there's going to be people that will reject him, but give everybody the chance to follow him. So that's what it is. It's just working together, region by region, across this world, and forget about labels, forget about individual. It's like there's one church, there's one head, Amen. And that's Jesus Christ.
Right. Yeah, Eric did a great job explaining that, but it is such a joy. And like I said, I've said this several times, but over the last 5 years, the way that organizations have come together and just throw away their labels and their brands to actually see the kingdom won for the Lord. Without worrying about their name, has been amazing. But, how do you get to a rapid, disciple making movement? Is to let's focus on the places where nobody's working, and let if Eric's group and Doug's group and Lee's group is really doing a great job in one area of the world, why should we go there? We'll go attack one of the other areas, and it just gives us more focus on how to do that and to see quicker movements and actually outpace the birth rate of the world and start making traction.
Which leaves me with one permeating question, Roger. All of us who have maps and stuff to remind us to pray for the world, why do you have a poster with peppers behind you? What's the story on that?
So, the short answer is, before I moved into this house with my roommates, I lived in a minivan. So I had gotten rid of a lot of my artwork. And so the posters behind me of peppers and coffee are my roommates, because they wanted to make the kitchen.
Dude, I want to see what the decor of that minivan was.
Carpet, shag carpet.
There was a lot of curtains, so nobody could see in, mainly. So,
Roger, you were homeless.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's really awesome that we could talk about collaborating. That's just another maybe a little taste of just what we're talking about, which I know we talked about connecting, communicating, collaborating when we talk with Guy Caskey. So if you want to listen to that podcast, go and do it. But really, this podcast is an outgrowth of desiring to cross-pollinate and collaborate more. So I love to hear how John and Eric, you've encouraged that. I know it's encouraged me too. But I think that's about the time that we have. So if you listen to this, check out those resources we mentioned. Check out 2414, ZoomA. We'll have links in the description. Check out the YouTube channel. Heck, leave a rating or review if you think about it. That would help a lot. Thanks again to all my co-hosts, and thanks again to Eric and Derry for joining us today.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
How are you making more disciples? What problems have you encountered? What successes have you celebrated? What questions do you have? Share your stories with us by visiting moredisciples.com/contact. If you're looking for next steps on growing your ability to make and multiply disciples, visit moredisciples.com to find resources, tools, and events all designed to help you make more disciples.